We are going to identify the amplitude, check if there's a reflection, check if there's a vertical shift, a period, and a phase shift. So remember, when you're graphing cosecant, you're really graphing y equals -5 sine of 2x plus 2. And we notice that the amplitude will be the absolute value of -5, which is equal to 5. With a negative present, there is going to be a reflection. Vertical shift, in other words, is the midline going to change to plus 2? The new midline is d equals 2. The period, remember, for sine is 2 pi over b, in this case it's 2. So the new period is pi, and there is no phase shift, none. For number 2, remember that you're going to have to graph y equals 1/4 cosine 3x minus pi over 2 minus 5. And the amplitude in this case, it's 1/2. The absolute value 1/2, which is 1/2. There is no reflection. Because there isn't a negative and right before the 1/2. Vertical shift, there is. It goes down. Yes, it goes down 5 units, so you're going to have a new midline, which is d equal -5. The period, remember, is 2 pi over b. In this case, b is 3, so you have 2 pi over 3. And there is a phase shift. You're going to move, since it's negative, you're going to move to the right, pi over 2. For number 3, remember, it's cosecant, so you would have to graph first y equals -1/5 sine 4x plus pi. So the amplitude is the absolute value of -1/5, which is 1/5. There is a reflection. How do I know? Because the negative right in front of the 1/2. Vertical shift, I would say no, none. Period, remember it's 2 pi over the value of b. In this case, b is 4. So you have 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. And the phase shift, you're going to shift left, pi units. So we're going to graph cosecant 1/4 x. Remember that you have to graph first y equals sine 1/4x, right? First, you got to find the period. So the period is pi over 1/4, which is 2 pi times the reciprocal 1/4, which is 4/1. So the period is 8 pi. So remember that sine starts at 0, ends now at 8 pi, and it will have a max at 1, a maximum at 1, and in this case, it's going to also intersect at 4 pi. So between 0 and 4 pi is 2 pi, so this is going to be 1. And then between 4 pi and 8 pi is 6 pi, and it's going to be 1. And so what I need you to do is graph, like she says, a dashed line. And wherever sine is 0, and since it's a reciprocal, cosecant is a reciprocal of sine, that tells you that's where your asymptotes are going to be. So your asymptote will go through 0. It will also go through 4 pi. It will also go through 8 pi, because that's where it's going to be undefined. Now to draw cosecant, remember their parabolas, and do a better job than I do. Their parabolas. And there's one period of cosecant. Remember that to graph secant, you have to first graph cosine. So I'm going to write y equals the cosine of 2x plus 3. And then we know that that plus 3 is going to shift it up 3 units. And that's our new midline. We have 2x, so to find the period of cosine, it's going to be the period is equal to 2 pi over b, which in this case it's 2. So the period is pi. We know that at 0, cosine has a max, and at pi, since it's going to end, it's going to have a max. So remember, it's going to go up 1, and it's going to go up 1, and since in between 0 and pi, it's pi over 2, so it's going to go down 1. So in between 0 and pi over 2 is pi over 4. This is pi over 4. So this is going to intersect right there. 0, 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. This will be 3 pi over 4. It's going to intersect here. So we're going to go ahead and graph and if we wanted to extend it, we're kind of extending the we notice that anytime it hits the x-axis, there's going to be a vertical asymptote. So there should be an asymptote here. 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 And then remember, we're going to draw parabolas. And there is an asymptote right here. So you draw your parabola. And to remember, for secant, it goes from 0 to pi. So just so you can see it, you have half of it here, you have the other half here, and then here's the other parabola. So this right here is the period from 0 to pi, and then it repeats. Okay, for number 6, we are going to have to graph y equals negative cosine of x minus 2. Remember that the period is 2 pi over b. In this case, it's just 2 pi over 1, so it's 2 pi. The new midline is negative 2. So we have 1, 2, so it's 2's here. Here's our midline. So this is where we're going to graph our cosine graph for right now. That's our new x-axis, so just pretend that that's the x-axis. So now we know that cosine starts with a max, but in this case it's going to be a min because of the negative. So it's going to start at -1, and it's going to end at -1, and then at pi it's going to have a max. In between 0 and pi is pi over 2, and that's where it's going to intersect. In between pi and 2 pi is 3 pi over 2, and that's where it's going to intersect. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch, or I'm going to graph cosine by doing a dash line. And wherever it crosses the midline, that's where it's going to be undefined. I'm going to extend it. So I'm going to use green to indicate the asymptotes. So here's the first asymptote. And I'm going to go ahead and extend it so we can see the whole picture here. So at 3 pi over 2, we have another asymptote. So now I'm going to use the blue to show secant. And I'm having a hard time doing it, so I'm going to do it again. So here's secant. It's kind of curved. And of course, here's the other half. For number 7, we're going to have to graph. Remember, we have to graph y equals 3 sine of x plus 1. We do know that the amplitude is 3. We know that the new midline is 1. And we know that the period is 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. We're going to first start off by drawing our new x-axis, which is it's going to shift up 1 unit. So just pretend this is your x-axis. We still know that it's going to start at 0, 0, 1, and it's going to end at 2 pi 1. And at pi, it's going to intersect at 1. In between 0 and pi is pi over 2. And in between pi and 2 pi is 3 pi over 2. And that's where you're going to have your max. In this case, we know that the amplitude is 3, so it's going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. And we know it's going to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. So go ahead and sketch your sine graph. And wherever it crosses the midline, we know that's going to be an asymptote. Not the x-axis where it crosses the midline. And remember that we are going to have a parabola. And then we also have a parabola. And this is cosecant. Since I know that we have a phase shift of pi over 4, I'm going to break this down into quarters. So this is 0. This is 0. This is pi over 4. This is 2 pi over 4. This is 3 pi over 4. This is 4 pi over 4. This is 5 pi over 4. This is 6 pi over 4. This is 7 pi over 4. 2 pi is 8 pi over 4. And this is 9 pi over 4. I did that because the graph is going to have to shift. And this is negative pi over 4, negative 2 pi over 4. So remember, we're going to have to graph y equals 1/2 sine x minus pi over 4. So we know that the amplitude is 1/2. We know that the period is 2 pi. And we know that the phase shift it's a negative. You would think it'd shift to the left, but it's going to shift to the right, pi over 4. So what does that mean for sine? Well, we know at pi over 4, it's going to have to be 0. And it would have ended at 2 pi, but we had to move over pi over 4, so it's going to have to be 9 pi over 4. So in between pi over 4 and 9 pi over 4 is actually 5 pi over 4. In between pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. So in this case, you're going to have a max at 1/2. And in between 5 pi over 4 and 9 pi over 4 is 9 plus 9. In between is going to be 7 pi over 4. Okay, so there is sine. And remember that wherever it crosses the x-axis, that is your vertical asymptote. And here is the parabola that you have to draw. Once again, do a better job than I did. Here's a parabola. I'm going to be graphing secant. So remember, you have to graph y equals 4 cosine x minus pi. I know that the amplitude is 4. I know that the period is 2 pi. And I know that the phase shift is pi, so it's going to move to the right. Cosine, we know that in this case it's going to start at pi, is going to have a max of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it has to be at 2 pi, and we did shift, so it's going to be at 3 pi, it's going to have to be at 4. And then at 2 pi, it's going to have a min at negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we know that it's going to intersect here at 3 pi over 2. And it's also going to intersect here. So let me go ahead and graph cosine here. Of course, do a better job. It's not really a V. And of course, you're going to have asymptotes at that point, and you're going to have an asymptote at this point. And it's supposed to be more curved. And then you're going to have the graph look like this. So that's one period of secant. For number 10, we're going to have to graph y equals 2 cosine x plus pi over 3 minus 2. So we know that the amplitude is going to be 2. we know that the new midline is -2, and we know that the phase shift is going to shift to the left pi/3. So cosine, remember, starts at a max and ends in a max, but in this case we have to draw the new midline first. Remember, that's going to be your x-axis, okay? So here's your x-axis, and we know that we have to do a phase shift to the left, so we're actually starting at -pi/3. So we're going to move to the left to -pi/3, and we're at the midline. We have to go up 2 spaces. So here's our max. And of course, we have to go at the end of the cycle. In this case, it's going to be 5pi/3, and it's going to be a max. Now, in between -pi/3 and 5pi/3 should be the middle. In this case, it should be (2pi/3), and you're going to have a min of 2. And in between -pi/3 and 2pi/3 is going to be the intersection. So this will be the intersection, this will be the intersection. So I'm going to go ahead and remember that the intersection will be the vertical asymptotes, and then you just have to draw your graph cosecant. So we know that it's going to be in between pi. In this case, it's going to be 3pi/3 plus 4pi/3. So that is, I think that's 7pi/6. I want to say that's 7pi/6. And in between pi/3 and 0, that's going to be pi/6. So let me write this down. This is going to be pi, x equals pi/6, and this one is going to be in between pi and 4pi/3. Remember, pi is the same thing as saying 3/3. So 3/3 plus 4/3 gives you 7/3 divided by 2. So it's 7pi/6. That is your asymptotes. Your asymptote is pi/6 and 7pi/6. So you're going to have to graph y equals 2 sine 1/2 x. So the amplitude is 2. The period is 2 divided by 1/2, which is 4 pi. It's actually 2 pi divided by 1/2, which gives you 4 pi. So we know that sine starts at 0, ends at 4 pi, and also intersects at 2 pi. And so in between 0 and pi, we have pi. And that is going to be our highest point. In this case, it's 2. In between 2 pi and 4 pi is 3 pi. That's going to be -2. Your asymptotes are going to be where it crosses the x-axis. So at 0, at 2 pi, at 4 pi. Go ahead and draw your parabolas. And there is cosecant.